so it should help me if none of you blinked or moved the entire time. And if you look in the back, I think she must have snuck in last night because there's more stuff in there. It truly is an honor to be here today. I'm so very grateful. Like Pastor Mike said, I have 3 children. My son Kyle is 15, about to be 16 in 3 weeks, which is going to be a whole new set of worries and probably a whole new realm of medication for mommy. My son Ryan is 12, and my daughter Emma is 7. All 3 of my kids are great, wonderful personalities. I could share a lot of stories with you about them, but it's my son Ryan that you're going to get to know today. It's my son Ryan who taught me to see the world from a very unique, very amazing point of view. And it's my son Ryan who gave me permission to share this view in my blog, The Honesty of Autism. I did get his permission. He hoped he would be rich and famous. That has not happened yet. Still okay with me sharing, and I'm going to share it with all of you today. For me, it took 7 words, only 7 words, to transform me from a ferocious, claw-bearing mama bear who would take on anything or anyone who mistakenly got between me and my cubs, to a deer stuck in the headlights and I didn't know which way to turn. Your son has an autism spectrum disorder, the psychologist said. It was those 7 words that turned my world upside down. I didn't transform from this ferocious bear to this terrified deer in a matter of seconds because I didn't see the headlights coming. I did. I had Googled and obsessed over the word autism for months and months and months. But every time I Googled, I thought, wow, Brian doesn't flap, he doesn't spin, he doesn't perseverate, whatever that meant at the time, I didn't know. But he did not fit the qualifications, so in my mind, he didn't have autism. There were, however, some things that I can look back on now that I know that I didn't know then. Brian's speech. He had very little of his own speech. Much of his speech was what he saw on television shows, what he heard other people say. He resembled a parrot more than he did a 2-year-old boy. I could ask him how his day was, and he could not for a minute begin to talk about his day, but he could recite a Thomas the Tank Engine video from beginning to end. Perfect example, I would say, hey Brian, what do you want for a snack? And he would say, want for a snack. And I would say, no, what do you want for a snack? And he would say, no, what do you want for a snack? And I would end up banging my head on the pantry doors, and Brian would still be hungry because I had no idea what he wanted to eat. In addition to the speech, his eye contact wasn't the greatest. Whenever I would talk to him and be standing right in front of him, instead of looking at me, he would kind of look out the corner of his eyes. And he would sometimes answer my questions, but the eye contact was just never looking down at the floor, just kind of out the corner of his eyes. In addition to the eye contact and the speech, there were a lot of sensory issues. Haircuts, oh my gosh, haircuts was like waterboarding for this child. Walking in, from the moment we walked into the salon to the moment we walked out, he would be sobbing, slobbering, snot pouring, hair stuck to every part of his body except his head. Toenail clipping and fingernail clipping. Fingernail clipping wasn't quite as bad, but toenails, to this day, I have to bribe him with an Annie Ann's pretzels to get him to let me clip his toenails. And trust me, he holds me to that every single time. But when he was little, I would swear it was like I was spelunking in a cave. I would go in on the bottom bunk, he's sound asleep, I'd have a flashlight literally in my mouth, one hand holding his foot, one clipping the toenails, sending a prayer to God, please don't let him wake up, please don't let him wake up. I had so many goose eggs at that time because every time he'd wake up, I'd whack my head on the top bunk trying to dive down and get caught. So yeah, there were sensory things for sure. But with all this sensory stuff, and his eye contact and his speech, it was funny, I can remember the moment that I knew Ryan was different. Something just wasn't right. It was silly, we would walk down the steps, but every time we walked down the steps, every time my foot hit the step, he would go, which in and of itself, not so weird, but it would change depending on the type of shoe I was wearing. If it was a heel, his pitch would go up. If it was a soft-soled shoe, his pitch would change. And at the time, even though I was kind of freaking out about it, my husband and I kind of laughed about it and said, he's like Rain Man. Not so funny, that word, not so funny several years later. As I sat in that psychologist's office, all my years of worrying, all my obsessive Google searching, convincing myself, Brian certainly doesn't have autism because under Section 2A of the DSM-4, he doesn't do 3 out of these 5 things, so he doesn't have autism, right? But unfortunately, he did. Unfortunately for me at the time, everything became different. My worries became different, my dreams for Ryan became different, and although the wonderfully kind-hearted psychologist looked at me and said, he is the same little boy he was before he walked into this office, I didn't believe her. And if I'm honest, I kind of wanted to hit her heart. For Ryan, he may have been the same little boy, but somehow different still weighed heavily on my heart. My heart had known Ryan was different for quite some time, but I don't think my brain was ready to hear it. I don't think anybody's ever is. I'd like to tell you that it only took me a moment to go from that scared, shaking deer back into that ferocious mama bear, but it didn't take me a moment. It took me months, and if I'm honest, it took me years. It was easy to protect Ryan from the meanies on the playground or shield him from the bullies on the street because I had done that for Kyle. I knew what to do. This autism thing was new to me. The meltdowns, the inability to communicate effectively, the sensory stuff was all different. In my blog, The Honesty of Autism, I talk about my two best friends, Denial and Clueless. These friends have been with me for a very, very long time. When they were part of my inner circle, when we were hanging out all the time, unfortunately, Denial and Clueless kept me from seeing the amazing, awesome little boy who was standing right in front of me as I consumed myself with different and tried so hard to make him sane. I remember a moment when he was pretty little. I had been at Kyle's soccer field, and all the other siblings were running around, playing. It was sunny, it was windy, there was whistles blowing. I'm not kidding you when I tell you Ryan was literally trying to climb back into the womb. His head was burrowing into my stomach, and I was so worried, and I was so scared that something was wrong. And I got home that day, and as he's playing with his Thomas the Tank Engine videos, I looked at him and I screamed, "Why can't you be normal?" And I collapsed in my foyer and began to sob and couldn't believe I just said those awful words to my child as he continued to play with his Thomas trains, seemingly unaffected by my words. In those early days, in my attempt to change Ryan from different to sane, Denial and Clueless caused me to miss so much of the present as I constantly worried about the future. My fear of different became all-consuming, wanting only the same, that I was blind to the beauty of different. Then I watched a movie. The movie was called Temple Grandin on HBO. And that was the first time I was able to see my son. For those of you who may not have heard of Temple Grandin, she is probably the most famous woman living with autism. She was diagnosed with autism in the 1950s when very little was known about autism. Her mother was told to institutionalize Temple because she would never get better. Temple is a published author. She is an autism advocate, and she was probably the first person living with autism to actually explain how the autistic mind works. In addition, Temple has completely transformed the cattle industry in this country and in countries around the world. She has a PhD in animal husbandry, and she actually has created more humane slaughterhouses, which I know sounds like an oxymoron, but that's true. Temple is quoted as saying that people living with autism are different, not less. I certainly, to the deepest part of my soul, believe that as I stand here today, but it took me a long time to come to that understanding. In fact, I often wondered early, did Temple's mother feel that way back in the 1950s when the finger was pointed at her for causing her daughter's autism? It was the so-called refrigerator mother theory. They believed that autism was caused by cold, unnurturing moms who did not tend to their child's needs at a specific time in their development. Temple's mother never believed it. In fact, she fought and she pushed for her daughter to be treated like every other child, regardless of how many doors were slammed in her face. I can't help but wonder, though, if, like me, in those early days, did Temple's mom actually believe different, not less, or did she just believe different meant not like all the other kids? Trying so hard to parent Ryan, just like Kyle, refusing to believe that his differences would hold him back or get in the way, I clung to my friends, Denial and Clueless, as I signed Ryan up for soccer. Yes, soccer. A child with sensory processing difficulties surely won't mind big clunky shin guards, a scratchy V-neck jersey, and cleats that he can barely walk in. My friends Denial and Clueless were with me as I wrote out the check, as we wrestled on the shin guards, and as we went to the soccer field every Saturday with the sun, with the bright sun in his eyes, the blowing wind, the screaming whistle. Poor Ryan's sensory system was in havoc. He was a mess. He didn't know which way to run. He didn't know where to run. He didn't know if he should sit down. And I remember one moment he actually got it right. He was on the field where he should be. He was as proud as could be. And his coach, in a not so nice, I wanted to kick him in the head voice, said, "Ryan, not you." And he just was so broken, like, and I was so, and you would think then I would be like, enough, we don't need soccer, but no, Denial, Clueless, we're fine, we'll get it next time, come on, one more game. Well, it's exactly what it took, one more game. And in that game, it happened to be an extra windy day, an extra bright sunny day, an extra cold day, and he literally, in the middle of the game, curled up in a fetal position and would not move. Kids were all the neurotypical kids jumping over him, playing around him. Picked him up, took them off the field, chucked the shin guards in the garbage can, and we didn't look back. And I would love to tell you that I left denial and clueless on that field with all those neurotypical kids' moms. I did. They came with me to baseball registration. That
was good.
It's spring. I had forgotten. It was fine. Baseball will make him look less different. He'll be more like all the other kids if he plays baseball. Well, let me tell you, for a kid who hated to have his hair combed, washed, touched, anything, let's put a batting helmet on his head. So I did, and this is how he ran. Yeah. He didn't look different at all. He looked just like everybody else, right? And he didn't look different when he was in the outfield, constantly looking for thunderclouds, possibly be a storm or for deadly bees that were coming. The fact that he did not get a concussion from a ball hitting him in the head is a miracle. We played baseball for one season too, needless to say. Once I finally stopped trying to make Ryan like everybody else, once I finally saw him, I saw a gift that he had, and that gift for Ryan was music. Ryan can play the piano like somebody who only has that gift can. Ryan has a voice that is so unbelievably beautiful that his music teacher has admitted to me that she would walk through the classroom and just get to stand and pause next to him in order to hear his voice. Once I stopped trying to make Ryan like Kyle and like all the other kids, I discovered that his differences make him a shiny, colorful pebble among all the gray dull stones. Just because Denial and Clueless skip town and I don't hang out with them quite as often as I used to, doesn't mean that different isn't hard, because it is. When I'm a chaperone on a field trip and not one child speaks to my kid the entire day, different is hard. Different is hard whenever preschool ended, and so did the birthday party invitations. Ryan hasn't been invited to a birthday party in 10 years. It's also hard whenever my son has to come up with a fantasy character. A kid who is so black and white and so literal. For 2.5 hours, we had to come up with a fantasy character, and he finally came up with Ed McMahon was his fantasy character. Ed McMahon delivers Publishers Clearinghouse checks to people's door. As I tried to give him an example of a Martian, landing in his house and playing video games with him, he felt that the possibility of Ed McMahon coming was greater than a Martian. But in Ryan's mind, it was. So those kind of moments, different can be hard, but different can be awesome too. Ryan was able to learn every country in the world in less than 48 hours on an iPad app, including all the countries in the Middle East, which I can't even pronounce. Different is awesome when you discover your son has perfect pitch, an ability to mimic the microwave beat to a T, the dishwasher sounds to a T, a bird outside the window, and music. And that perfect pitch ability also made him be selected for a select course at school that he had to try out for and audition for. Different is also awesome when Ryan's lack of social awareness, he doesn't realize that he shouldn't hold my hand in public, kiss me, or kiss me goodbye as he gets on the bus. Ryan's love for me is very different. It's unmatched by anybody else's. Different can be hard, different can be awesome, but mostly different is just different. I understand completely that my son's differences are very different than your son or your daughter's. In fact, many of you may want to come up here and hit me because your days are very different than mine, and your days may be much more harder than my days are. Each child with a different ability is as unique as any neurotypical child or as any typically developing child. I'm sure you've all heard the saying that there are no two snowflakes alike, but did you know that the beauty and complexity of how each individual snowflake is formed has a great deal to do with the environment that surrounds it? The shape and structure of the crystal are determined by conditions inside the cloud. And as a snowflake makes its way through the sky, the different conditions it encounters affects its growth. Regardless of the specific pattern of a snowflake, regardless of what makes it different, each and every one is beautiful, and the journey it embarks upon shapes this beauty. I like to think that as mothers, we are part of the environment that makes our unique snowflake so beautiful. The conditions inside our cloud, or our home, affect how each of our children grow, develop, and change. There's no greater factor than a mother's love. Although sometimes it's difficult when others are unable to see the unique and intricate patterns of our snowflakes and only see the blanket of snow that disrupts their day, that interferes with their plans, and that takes a toll on their nerves. We mothers in this room can appreciate each and every molecule that our snowflake has that makes them unique and makes them just who they were meant to be. And while the universal force of gravity gives each snowflake a shared destination, each snowflake takes its own path. They are on the same journey, but each takes a different path to arrive at their destination. Everyone's journey is different. You may walk a path similar to those sitting in front of you or right beside you, but your journey is unique to you and your family. Sometimes on this journey, you can feel so terribly alone, like nobody in the world, or even your closest friends or your supportive family, understands it. I can tell you that I have gained more strength sitting in a waiting room while Ryan is in a social skills class with moms who get it than my closest friends and my supportive family. Because these moms get it in a way that only a mother loving a child with a different ability can. Yes, we are all on a different journey, but we have shared experiences that make getting there a little less lonely. Today, you are not alone. Today is different. And I am so grateful for the opportunity to share my journey and my son's journey with you. But honestly, I feel undeserving because compared to many of your trials and heartaches, mine pales in comparison. But regardless of our differences, the one thing that we all have in common is the joy we feel in our hearts when we see progress. Progress that may once have seemed monumental for some who have been told by others, professionals, that there wouldn't be progress in areas. Watching our child for quite some time appeared invisible to many is now seen with their beautiful, intricate patterns that makes them just who they are. I'd like to show you a video now of my beautiful, intricate snowflake who has taught me to see that autism may make him different, but he has proved to me time and time again, different, not less. Back in those early days, when we were both trying to understand each other and trying to learn from each other, for the most part, those days are behind us. Don't get me wrong, we still have hideously ugly moments. And with me approaching 45, menopause-ish, I have a feeling there are many ugly moments still to come. But once I finally saw Ryan, once I stopped seeing different, I worked out the balance. Beautiful, beautiful song. You can come over to my house later for a private viewing and we can have wine. Yes, my favorite line in that song is, if you look past this moment, you'll see you've got a friend waving a flag for who you are and all you're going to do. Each and every one of you is that friend waving that flag, making sure your son or your daughter is visible, regardless of their different ability. We all have our deer stuck in the headlight moments, and we all have our mother bear moments. That's true for any mother, but it seems like a parent loving a child with a different ability has moments that tend to be more extreme on both ends. The saying goes, God doesn't give you what you can't handle. And I'm sure there are days when we all feel like someone must have photoshopped a picture of Hercules next to our name in God's book. I think it's fair to say that regardless of how many deer moments we have, or how many mama bear moments we have, mama bear usually wins out in the end. Everyone in this room sees your individual snowflake as being complex, unique, and beautiful. We appreciate the snowflake for its perfectly imperfect, unique intricacies, but that doesn't mean that we don't get frustrated, dismayed, weighted down by the blanket of snow. When the movie that finally helped me see my beautiful snowflake, Temple Grandin, won the Emmy, the cast insisted Temple join them on stage. It was awesome. When Temple was called a hero and thanked by the producer, Temple, in her very autism-y-like fashion, grabbed the mic out of the producer's hand. She scanned the audience and she said, "Mother, where are you? Stand up, Mother." And every time I see it, I cry. Temple didn't shout for her teacher. She didn't shout for her therapist, her psychologist, her doctors, her professors, or her mentors. Temple shouted, "Stand up, Mother." Because Temple knows that her mother, had she listened to the experts, and her mother had given up on her, and had not believed different, not less, Temple's life would have just been different. For all the things Temple Grandin's mother did right, and all the things she did wrong, she knew it was her mother who gave her the opportunity and the support and courage to believe different, not less. Sorry. I realize that the chance of a Hollywood studio, Paramount, calling you guys tomorrow and saying, "Hey, we want to make a movie about your kid," the chances are that's probably not going to happen. But if they come calling and an Emmy is won, and your child is on stage, the applause will be for your child, for all the obstacles they have overcome. But I promise you that if your child is on that stage, he will be scanning the audience for your face, and they will shout, "Stand up, Mother." Because even on your worst days, when you're exhausted and your patience has run thin, and you feel more like a frightened deer than a fighting bear, you are the reason your child is visible. You are the reason for every success, no matter how big or how small. And you are the reason your child is different, not less. So since your child is not here, and we're not at the Emmys, I'm going to ask you to all stand up, Mother, and give yourself a round of applause.